Um, Good afternoon, Madam Secretary. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, I'm going to be much more brief today. My co-ranking member did a fine job. She covered most of the territory I wanted to, but I just have a few follow-ups. I also just want to make a quick comment for some of the folks who have been tweeting and commenting this meeting and the previous one that somehow this is a filibuster attempt when my Republican colleagues and I ask you and other members of the administration a lot of questions. And I just want to assure people that, you're a major proponent of this legislation. And, we're trying to get the information from the horse's mouth. And I assure you, I have no desire to waste anyone's time, nor make this meeting last until the wee hours of the morning. So I'll leave it with that. And I will try and be as quick as I can on some of these questions. So on the drop boxes, just to begin with, I guess the focus there is my concern and people that have come to me, just it's simply a chain of custody situation. So would you be kind enough to explain to us how we are maintaining an appropriate chain of custody? Like, for example, when, at individual voting precincts, at the end of the night, the ballots are collected and they are stored in bags and locked, and they are transported back to the central location, town hall or whatever. But they are constantly under the supervision of a Republican and a Democrat to make sure that nothing funny happens with those ballots. And I see that is a lacking component when we move to drop boxes. So can you do anything to help reassure me that we are going to have an appropriate means of verifying that the ballots are not tampered with from the time they go into the box till the time they are counted? Through you, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you. Through you. We're not doing anything different with absentee ballots that are dropped in drop boxes than have ever been done with absentee ballots. There is a chain of custody. It's well defined. The town clerks take care of absentee ballots. They have a way of storing them. We don't count ballots before Election Day in Connecticut, so that is all governed by current law, and we're not changing anything about that, except that they're going to walk out to this box and get the ballots and bring them into their office. And the same rules apply. It's just that there were more of them this time. And so until we have a situation where potentially, I hope, we make them available again to a broader range of people, there aren't that many. So it's the standard chain of custody we always have for absentee ballots.
I appreciate your testimony, Madam Secretary, and I respect you very much. I don't want to debate you here on that, but that's just simply cannot be true. For example, a town clerk doesn't work on weekends. So there's no one monitoring those boxes, from Friday at 5 p.m. when they lock up shop. And this is, ones that they may have some direct oversight at because it's right at the town hall. But when the boxes that are out on the street corner somewhere in New Haven, nobody's watching that box. That strikes me as a direct flaw in the custody argument. And also, you mentioned to me that you feel they're more secure than mailboxes. I want to point out that a modern U.S. Postal Service mailbox has nothing but a tiny slit. You can't really even put a very thick envelope in one, whereas these boxes have a door that opens that you can put a sizable envelope in, bigger than what the absentee ballot envelope is, and then close it. And I want to share something with you, Madam Secretary, which is that, during the last election, I am an administrator on a Facebook page that asks people to report concerns with elections. And I got many comments from people about lots of different things, mostly about receiving absentee ballot applications for people that don't live in their home or in multiple names and things like that. But one of the things I received was a photograph of one of these drop boxes, and I'd be happy to share it with the committee. And I don't have any way, I don't want to make any allegations or anything, but it would be a very, very difficult photo to Photoshop, if you ask me. And it's one of those drop boxes that has multiple, maybe 6 or 7, I'm looking at it, 6 or 7 ballot envelopes stuffed in it, maybe presumably because the box was overfilled. I mean, they're clearly the right envelopes. I don't know that there'd be a way for someone to doctor this photo or something like that. It's a concern I have, that what if that did happen? What if the box overfilled and people are leaving their ballot envelopes hanging out of the slit or the door? Anyway, I don't know that there are answers to these questions. I just wanted to draw some attention to the chain of custody concerns that some of us have are legitimate. Is there any way to monitor these drop boxes during the weekends? Will there be any police presence? Anything that you might contribute to say, hey, Senator Sampson, you can feel much more confident about the drop boxes because they're going to be monitored in some way. And that the person that's going to pick up the ballots, we're going to have their name on file, et cetera, or they will swear to an affidavit that they are, transporting the ballots under penalty of whatever. Can you help me in some way trust the boxes? This is what I'm after, because I don't necessarily trust absentee ballots going through the U.S. Postal Service either. But at this point, I trust that more than the boxes. And you seem to believe they're more secure. And I gave you a bunch of arguments why I say no. Help me understand why you think the opposite.
I will try. I can only tell you that the drop boxes are extremely secure. I don't think you have any reason to worry that somehow they're going to be sabotaged or overrun with too many ballots. I mean, I'm sure there were instances where everything did not run perfectly in this election and every election. I think most of your questions would be addressed to town clerks, who are the ones who are responsible for the actual implementation of all this. But we did the best we could, and I think we did a very good job, by the way, of trying to come up with standards and practices that would make it easiest for voters and for clerks, but mostly for voters. And when I say I think it's more secure than a post office box, I'm not sure I think that's exactly true, but we did have a lot of questions about the timeliness of the delivery of the post office during COVID. I mean, a lot of these things were unique circumstances where we had to react and make things as good as we could for all the voters in the state. The main goal was to make sure that everyone could vote and that they could be secure in the knowledge that their ballot had actually arrived if they chose not to appear at a polling place for very valid reasons, by the way. And so if we had occasions where town clerks couldn't quite manage the flow of the ballots, maybe that happened. I'm not sure if it did or it didn't, but there could have been instances like that. But, you know, all these arguments remind me that if you have so little evidence of a problem, you shouldn't be worrying about just not doing it at all. It kind of reminds me of the fact that every time you go outside your house and cross the street, you probably have a 1 in a million chance of getting hit by a car. But that doesn't mean you're not going to cross the street again. It just means there's a chance of mishaps. And in this instance, I suppose if someone had reported that instance that you're citing to the town clerks, they may have been able to deal with it. But I'm sorry to hear it happened, if it did. And, we have to do the best we can under any circumstance. There is no doubt in my mind that the ballot boxes made it far easier for folks to vote and to be sure that their ballots arrived at town hall. That was the goal of the ballot boxes. They are as secure as anyone can make them. They're widely used across the country and have been for many, many years. And I think they are a valuable asset in our goal of getting everybody to be able to vote. And I hope we can make them permanent, because they are, first of all, they're now the property of the towns. We bought these boxes. They were very popular with voters. As you can see, if the boxes were actually overflowing, that means great. We got more people voting. But, you know, I think you have to think about the voters in this instance. And that's all I can say, is I think we have to do everything we can to make it possible for everybody to get their ballots delivered in a timely way. And the clerks, I'm sure, do the best they can.
Respectfully, Madam Secretary, you put a lot of words in my mouth in those comments. I am not suggesting that we don't use the drop boxes. I asked pretty pointed and direct, and I think solid, important questions about chain of custody and security issues. And you simply answered me by saying you think it's more secure. You didn't answer any of my concerns at all directly. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but you're implying that somehow I don't want people to have access to voting. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. This committee took votes the other day on the constitutional amendments, and I believe all of the Republican members of the committee joined the Democrats in supporting both initiatives as long as there were security, concerns addressed as part of it. And that's the same thing here. So my concern about the drop boxes, and I'll move on, is not I don't want to provide access to voting. It's we have to make sure we have a responsibility to make sure that people can trust those ballot boxes. And the things I mentioned are real things. And it doesn't matter what party you're in or whether your candidate won or lost. We should be making sure everyone's vote matters enough that we will never take a chance that there's inaccurate votes or ballots that are lost or stolen because they're hanging out of a drop box. I want to just move on to the audit situation. I know that the state of Connecticut does do audits of elections, and I think that's great, and I appreciate your desire to expand them. But you did, in your testimony, say that I can't remember the exact comment, but it was something to the effect that we do a lot more auditing than other places, that kind of thing. But I just want to confirm for the record, we do not audit election day registrations and those votes, do we?
No, we do not. We audit the machines. We audit the tabulators. That's right.
Right. So if someone comes in and swears that they are John Smith and they're going to vote on election day and they cast their vote, there's no way to ever really know whether that person was John Smith. The clerk will actually send out a registration card when they register them. And we learned from testimony in the last hearing that some of those registrations didn't occur for months afterwards. I don't know the reason for that, but the person voted on election day registration on November 3rd, but they didn't actually become registered till March, which is a whole separate problem. But it does show that there is a loophole there. Would you be in favor of some process to help audit election day registration where we at least collect the returned registration cards and verify whether those are legitimate voters or not? Through you, Madam Chairman.
I'm not sure that would be a completely new type of audit, but we could look at it. If you have ideas about how to do it, we'd be listening.
Understood. Well, it's a bill I propose every year, and I know that there are members in both parties that are interested and want to find the best way to make sure that we are verifying the veracity and integrity of our elections. So I thank you for the answer, and I appreciate your willingness to work with me on it. A lot of the policies that you've come to us with, I don't object to. I want to provide access to voting also. We just have concerns about making sure some of these security items are taken care of. We also don't verify signatures for absentee ballots, as you pointed out in your conversation with Representative Mastro Francesco. But many states do have a signature verification process, and some of them are very robust, where they actually collect multiple signatures in multiple places from folks. So they have a really solid record. Do you have any objections, for the Secretary of State's office beginning the process of setting a signature verification policy in place to be implemented at some point in the future if we, as you said, we radically increase the number of people voting by absentee ballot? It seems like it might be a smart idea. What do you think about that?
I think that is something we're probably going to have to look at some form of that should we get to the point where we have many more absentee ballots. I mean, remember, up until now, we've only had about 4% of the population voting by absentee ballot. When and if the constitutional amendment is passed and we're able to allow people to get absentee ballots more readily, I think we probably should look at some sort of verification system for a large number. Don't forget, most of the states that have the verification system have them in place. Those are vote by mail states. And that's why they have such a very, very...
Right. Well, I mean, this is the reason why I'm bringing it up is that I'm sorry, I thought you were done, but you were just cutting out, Madam Secretary.
Well, it looks like the secretary might be frozen.
Such a very...
We'll give her just a minute.
Hopefully it's
Secretary
just a
Merrill,
signal.
perhaps Secretary Merrill, if you turn off your camera, but turn your microphone back on, we can hear you, if not see you.
Madam Chair, are we back?
Yep, Madam Secretary, the floor is still yours. I think you cut out while you were just talking.
Oh, okay. I think we were talking about signature matching protocols, right? Yeah, I think I was just pointing out that most of the states that have the signature matching protocols that are quite extensive in some cases, like Colorado, are mostly vote by mail states where people are just mailed a ballot. There is no application. If you are on the list, you are mailed a ballot for the next election, and then you mail it back. So that's why they feel they have to have a more extensive verification. Where here we have an entire process of applying for a ballot, getting it back in the mail. So, and also, as I was saying, we don't have that many. Should we get to the point after passage of a constitutional amendment where we need to institute a more robust system, I think I would be all ears.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, through Madam Chairman. I appreciate your comments, although you're forgetting that the most recent election, we had a lot more than 4%. 650,000, I think, is the number you have used. So I believe signature verification should have been required in that election. Under perfect circumstances, which of course I understand we did not have. But if we ever move to a set of circumstances that has that many absentee ballots, I hope that this body and the members of this committee recognize that we really do need to address that concern. I'm almost done, Madam Secretary. I'm going to just make a quick comment on the setting up a district for absentee ballot counting. Representative Mastro Francesco asked you about this. I just want, for clarification's sake, are you suggesting that we establish a separate precinct number for the absentee ballots in each election district? Through you, Madam Chair?
No. I'm just trying to net in those centrally counted ballots. This results from the fact that when we first began auditing ballots after the fact, and we're defining it as a certain number per precinct, that at that time, most towns counted locally at the precinct level. And what's happened over the years is more and more towns are counting centrally, and they're not part of the audit process. And that, I think, statistically makes a difference for us. So we're just trying to find a way to define every place where they're counting ballots as part of that process. It has nothing to do with creating more precincts.
Okay, thank you for that answer, Madam Secretary. I guess, do we not now, when we do an audit of a particular Senate district, for example, are the absentees not part of that audit currently?
Well, this isn't about absentee ballots. This is about ballots that are counted centrally. Some towns count the ballots at the actual precinct, and some towns count it, all of them. They bring them all to town hall and count them there. And those are the ones that right now are not included in our audit process. It's really not to do with absentee ballots.
Right. Well, the reason why I ask is simply through you, Madam Chairman, is because many towns that do they do count their absentee ballots centrally because they're returned centrally.
Right.
So that's what I'm driving at. Is it in a lot of small towns, like my town of Wolcott, for example, that's what happens here. is all of the absentee ballots are at town hall and they are counted in that location. They would not be part of a audit in, for example, my race or Representative Master Francesco's?
I believe that's true currently, but I'll ask Attorney Bromley to back me up on this. I'm not entirely certain how that works.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the effort to include them going forward either way. And so thank you very much for that, including that language in this bill. And I just have a final couple of comments about the two bills about incarcerated individuals. I guess what I would ask you on the subject of counting people for districting purposes based on being housed in prison, I guess it just leads to a lot of questions. Like, for example, if someone has a life sentence and they're never returning to the town that they lived in prior, does it make sense to count them as someone from the town of Ansonia or Farmington or wherever? Through you, Madam Chairman.
Yes, through you, Madam Chairman. It is. There are many questions regarding the administration of what would be, concerning these matters, and we've been through these conversations many times. And it is a complicated question, that residency question. But I guess in the end, I come down on the side of saying, they're not voting in that district. So in a way, you can see that for redistricting purposes, it doesn't really make sense to count them in a district where they're not voting. They're not able to vote, qualified to vote. So determining residency is sometimes a tricky problem, but I think the most sensible way to do it is to count them where they last resided, honestly. And that can be a very long time, you're right. But most of the time it is not.
Through you, Madam Chairman, thank you for that answer, Madam Secretary. I mean, I appreciate that opinion. The more questions I come up with, the less I agree with, though, unfortunately, because I just think, many people that are incarcerated in our state penitentiary system came from another state, for example. So we can't even count them as a resident of another town. And you start asking many, many more questions, and it leads to even more. But I look forward to working with my colleagues and hopefully coming up with a proper solution that is fair. And the final comment I want to just make to you today is your final conversation with Representative Master Francesco about folks that are on parole. I mean, to me, it was clear that you just disagree about the parameters of whether or not someone has paid their debt to society. And I just wanted to make that clear that we respect your position completely. And ours is just different. I look at it like when you are sentenced to punishment for a crime, and that punishment could be a lot of things. It could be time in prison, or it could be a fine. And parole to me is a part of that, because you are being let out of prison on parole, but you are still in the custody of the prison system, even though they're not holding you. So to me, you're still paying your debt to society. To me, that's a much brighter line. I didn't really like the way that conversation went. I just wanted to make sure that you understood we respect your position, and to clarify what both mine and Representative Master Francesco share that same view. And that's it, Madam Chairman. I'll leave it to the Madam Secretary if she wants to comment on that, but I'm done with my questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I agree, and thank you for clarifying, but I had the same impression. We just don't agree on where that line is. And for me, it's someone in the community. I'm thinking we ought to be encouraging their civic participation at that point. It's a difference of opinion. You're right. And I don't know if we'll resolve it, but I think she understood exactly my position, and I did understand hers. And I respect both. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator.